for joining us. This is going to be a really good opportunity, which is being hosted by and in partnership with Sask Interactive and Creative Sask. For those of you who here today who don't know who I am Darcy McLean. I'm the Executive Director of Sask Interactive, and coming to you today from a very warm and very sunny Saskatoon. And with me today is my co-host, Miss Tobi Lampard. She's the program manager at Creative Sask, and she manages the programs portion of Creative Sask's operations. Today, we are providing this webinar to you as part of a new lunchroom series around workshops in the grant space. And today's workshop that Tobi's hosting with me is the Digital Game Development Grant. And so we have a really good opportunity to host this, and individuals who are on the call here today will have a good opportunity for listen to Tobi's application process and other details to the launch of the new grant. So please, introduction to Tobi, and also we have Megan, who's also part of Creative Sask Online here today. And she's going to, Megan's going to manage us and keep us on track. So Tobi, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Darcy, and thank you for everyone joining, spending a bit of their lunch hour with me and Darcy. I'm going to just switch my camera off and go head into the presentation.
And just, sorry, Tobi, just for another quick note, we're going to take a Q&A at the end. And so if there's anyone that has any comments, questions, other discussion pieces, we'll put that into the chat, and then we'll do the chat and the Q&A at the end of Tobi's talk. Thanks,
Thank
Tobi.
you, Darcy. Great. Again, welcome everyone. We'll start with our land acknowledgement. Creative Saskatchewan supports creative entrepreneurs throughout the entire province of Saskatchewan in treaties 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10, which encompasses the unceded territories of the Nehiyawak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and Dene nations, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. As we go over today, just a quick agenda for us. We'll be going over the program overview, what's new, guideline highlights, where to go for more information, how to apply to the grant. And then, as Darcy mentioned, we're going to do a Q&A question period. So happy to answer your questions. Okay, we're going to dive in. What does this program support? The Digital Game Development Grant supports eligible Saskatchewan applicants in the production and innovation of original digital games and e-learning properties. The properties have to be commercial intent, and e-learning must include gamification. With gamification, we're looking at game mechanics that add interactivity, engagement, motivate the user in learning. The core products must be intended to entertain and educate the user. Further in this presentation, we're going to dive into the definition of eligible applicants and more details about eligible expenses. Okay, so what's new? Well, of course, the big news is this program is a grant. Creative Saskatchewan has moved from an equity program to a grant program. So Creative Saskatchewan will not have equity in the project. It will be in a form of a grant. Applications may apply at any stage of development. Applicants may only receive funding for one time for each stage of development of the same project. Applications are scored against an assessment criteria, there'll be more to come on the assessment criteria later in the presentation. But we want to remember that when you're applying for development money, that you clearly define the stage that you are applying for financial support for. You want to clearly define the work plan and the objective. What will you have completed at this stage of development? That'll be important in the application. Applicants may apply for a maximum of $100,000 or 50% of the total cash budget, whichever is the lesser, for one application or for the entire life of a project. So if for pending on the stage, you may not need $100,000 of 50% of the budget for the stage that you're applying for. Or you might need the 100,000 if you're applying for a complete, a rather large project. New eligible expenses. Concept design and prototype development expenses occurring up to 6 months before the application date can be included in the application. This includes concepts, prototypes, project management, etc. One note, if your application is successful, you will need to do reporting. This reporting will include providing proof of payments for any expenses over $500. Not to get too much into the weeds, but you'll have to provide receipts, proof of payments such as canceled checks for salaried employees. You'll have to have copies of pay stubs, etc. But this is quite important if you're applying 6 months before for expenses that you've incurred 6 months before. You want to make sure that you have your bookkeeping in order and you're able to provide all those proof of expenses when you come to report. And that's just something to get used to as you navigate the Creative Saskatchewan grants. New eligible expenses continued. Technical infrastructure is eligible for hardware and software that are project specific. Core business expenses such as capital expenditures, rent, purchase of real estate, or maintenance costs are still ineligible, but technical infrastructure that is project specific is now eligible. Marketing expenses up to 10% of the total budget are also now eligible. One thing I'll note is Creative Saskatchewan has some great marketing grants that go above and beyond this program. We have the Market and Export Micro Grant and the Market and Export Major Grant. So if you're doing a lot of marketing activities for your game or e-learning properties, look into those grants. Reach out to Creative Sask. We'll be happy to chat more. Okay, now we're going to dive into eligible applicants. Eligible applicants must meet the criteria in our general program guidelines, be an eligible Saskatchewan resident or Saskatchewan corporation, co-own or own the project, control the copyright, and share and receive a share of the revenue from sales, and have a minimum of 51% Saskatchewan ownership. If your application is approved, all agreements will be required to be given to Creative Saskatchewan before payment is issued. Continuing on, as kind of highlighted earlier, this grant program supports expenses related to the creating of digital games and e-learning properties aimed at commercial exploitation. Again, we have the gamification for e-learning, where you want mechanics that have interactivity, engagement, and motivate the user in learning. And applicants may apply at any stage of development. Continuing on, eligible concept designs and prototype development expenses can occur up to 6 months before application date. And I just want to highlight that applicants can include their salaries, but it has to be salaried. It cannot be volunteered or in kind. The applicant must put in industry standard rates in the budget. So you can include salaries paid to yourself, but they're not considered volunteer or in kind services. Again, technology infrastructure and marketing expenses up to 10% of the total budget. Now, ineligible projects and expenses. Here's my pitch to have a strong cup of coffee, tea, sugary drink. Read those guidelines. All the guidelines are located on creativesask.ca, and they outline specifically what is ineligible and a lot of other great details. So I'm not going to go through this entire list. Just encourage you to read through those guidelines, get familiar with what projects and expenses are ineligible. Any questions, always reach out to Creative Saskatchewan. Program officers are here to help. Okay, financial participation for this program. Funding is in the form of a grant. Again, you can apply up to $100,000 or 50% of the cash budget, whichever is lesser, for one application or the entire life of the project. Again, if you're doing, you can break up the development of your project, but each project is capped as $100,000 or 50% of the cash budget. Funds will be released on proof of the project being fully financed and the completion of a final report. So as mentioned, any financial agreements need to be submitted to Creative Saskatchewan if the application is approved. With the budgets, it's Creative Saskatchewan will provide up to 50% of the cash budget. So the other 50% of the budget often comes from third-party investors, personal contributions, other funding agencies such as the Canadian Media Fund. If you have questions about that, please reach out to the program team. Happy to navigate that question with you as you develop your project or your application. Typically, when your application is approved and your agreement is signed, you'll get a first payment of 80% of the grant, and then the second payment is 20% upon receipt and approval of the final report. Just to note that, again, it's 50% of the cash budget. So sometimes your final budgets are a little different from your application. So that 20%, that final payment, can be a little different than what you expected. It can be a little less if you came under budget, but Creative Saskatchewan never commits more than the original commitment. Now, if you have any questions about that, happy to give Creative Sask a call, and we'll be happy to walk you through that. Now we'll dive into the assessment. How do we assess these applications? Well, each application is assessed against an assessment criteria, and the criteria is available on the website. Also, this criteria is exactly what you'll be asked on the online portal. So these questions are what you're going to be talking about when you apply to Creative Saskatchewan. First, you'll want to describe your design elements and programming. You want to describe the user experience and interactive. And you can include uploads such as concept design, storyboards, visual designs to help explain the technical design and elements. You'll also be asked to provide your marketing strategy, providing a marketing and promotional strategy, making sure to include your distribution modes, the diversity and relevance of each model, the relevance and promotional activities, the level of interest from market channel partners, and/or quality of the self-distribution plan. We'll be looking at the team, and you'll be asked to describe the experience and achievement of the project producers, the management staff, creative and technical staff contractors, the marketing and promotional and sales staff or contractors. And again, it depends what stage of development you're applying for. Your team's going to obviously be different for each project. So we just try to list a lot of potential members you might be working with, and that'll be scored out of 10. Also, sorry, I got a little messed up here. You'll be looking at the Saskatchewan spend. You'll see that it's not marked, it's only marked out of 2 points for the Saskatchewan spend, but you will be asked how much of the budget is being spent in Saskatchewan. We'll also be looking at the financial viability of the project, where, in relation to the size of the project, how is the applicant going to finance the project, and how is the cash flow looking? Assessors will analyze the proposed budget, financial structure, how the project is financed, and the risk of the project's completion risk. And then the budget and financing is also assessed. If you're getting third-party financing, you'll get it's all broken down in the online, but 1 point is given to projects with 10% third-party investment. That could be investors, the Canadian Media Fund, other national funders. If you have over 30% of third-party investment from, again, personal, from investors or other organizations such as the Canadian Media Fund, you'll receive 5 points. So all of this is on the website, and you'll see that all of this assessment criteria is 50 points. So there are 50 points that you're able to get scored on with your application. So this is all on the website. You just want to start to get familiar with it. And again, encourage to reach out to Creative Saskatchewan if you have detailed questions once you get into your application. Anyone who's written a grant knows that it's a process, and it takes a lot of thought and consideration as you go through it. All right, the assessment. Step 1, there's initially reviewed from Creative Saskatchewan, and a few of those criteria are scored simply on the facts provided. That's internally scored by the staff, and then externally scored by the jurors. And that is all written down, which ones are scored through the jury process, and which points are given through internally assessed. Okay, so we're going to dive into the submission requirements and deadlines. So applications to the Digital Game Development Program will be accepted and supported on the available funds. The deadline is October 26th. What's important to note is that the program will be opening, and it opens in June. On June 27th, this particular program opens June 27th. The deadline is October 26th. Creative Saskatchewan has long windows to receive applications, trying to capture as much activity as possible. So we have those large windows for applications, but the deadline is October 26th, and it takes about 10 weeks to get your results back from the assessment. And just some housekeeping there. Applications have to be complete, and of course have to be eligible under the guidelines. Oh yes, if you are successful, we are always prompting people to say thank you to us, having the credits with the gaming, and just having our logos with any promotional materials. We're just putting it out there now, so people remember to have that when you're at the exciting release of your game or e-learning game. Okay, where to get information? I've said it a few times. Head over to creativesaskatchewan.ca. There are all the guidelines there. There's the assessment criteria and all of our contact information. You can contact the program team by email, phone. You can set up a Zoom call. Always happy to geek out on guidelines, and we love it when people call beforehand and reach out, not a week before the deadline or a day before the deadline, but planning well in advance for those deadlines. As anyone who's applied for a grant before knows that it does take time to write an exciting grant narrative and make a really compelling case to the jury to fund your program, to fund your game. Okay, to recap, I don't know if I've said it enough, but read the guidelines, get familiar with it, figure out if you're eligible, call us so we can help you through. The program team would love to answer your questions and ensure that you are eligible, ensure that your project is eligible, are your expenses eligible, and then look at that assessment criteria. That again is how you're presenting yourself and your project to the external committee, basically our jurors, and they just want to get so excited about your project because they know how much work goes into these great games, and they want to share your enthusiasm. To apply, again, reach out to Creative Saskatchewan. You want to do the application online. So you'll have to get an account with our online grant management system. So you just you can have access through the Creative Saskatchewan website, set up an account. You can have a look through the application, everything that's required. Again, the questions are on the assessment criteria. And remember that the applications must be complete before they can be assessed. And with our online system, you actually can't submit unless your application is complete. One note, I know the Interactive World is who I'm talking with today, but if you are on the road and trying to upload files for your application, have a good internet connection. Don't leave it last minute. We do take those deadlines are 4 p.m. and it's a strong 4 p.m. So we want to make sure that you have time to upload those files and that you can successfully complete your application and not have to worry about any technical problems before the deadline. You will need to use provided templates such as a budget. So you want to look at those templates ahead of time. And if you have questions about the templates, here I go again, reach out to Creative Saskatchewan. And the last note on how to apply, remember that you want to make it an easy, clear read for the jury. If possible, you want to share your enthusiasm with your words. You want to get the jury excited about your project, excited about the phase of development and the possibilities and the commercialization of your game or e-learning property. And it's always great to get someone to read your application through before you submit it. And you can ask those questions. Did they understand? Was it an easy read? Could they understand the schedule and budget? Did it get them kind of excited about what you're developing? And those are all good questions, because if your grant reader is getting excited, there's a good chance that the jury is going to get excited as well. I think that is about it. I hope I did not go too fast. And I'm very happy to answer questions. Hello.
There we
Hi,
go.
Darcy. I'm back on screen.
I got unmuted there. Good. Thank you, Toby. So we have a couple questions, Toby, in the Q&A here, and I'll just read them off to you for
Absolutely. Thank you.
Answer. Nova Alberts, is there a ceiling on the percentage / amount of the grant that can be for the applicant's salary?
Thank you, Nova. No, there is no ceiling. That's part of the external jurors looking at those budgets, and they are industry professionals. So as long as it's industry standards and the jury believes that your budget and financing for the project is of industry standards, there are no caps, nothing regarding salaries. It's just making sure that they are industry standards. So when your jury, and the jury is made of your peers, as I said, industry standards. So we get them to look at those budgets because they're the experts and they work in the industry.
Thanks, Toby. And Nova has another one here. Is there a minimum share of sales or key role requirement for the Saskatchewan owner? As long as it's 51% owned, those don't matter.
Yeah, so 51% owned, and they have to have a portion of the revenue. In terms of the revenue split, we don't get into the weeds there, but you do have to demonstrate that the applicant has a potential to make revenue from the back end of the project, and you do have to own 51%, but the revenue percentage, as long as you can demonstrate that you are monetizing the project and that your company is going to be potentially making lots of money, that's what we're looking for. I hope that answers the question.
Sound like it did to me, but we'll
see.
Another one from Bradley Bateman. I'm not very familiar with how grants work. For an independent developer working on projects after regular work hours, are there any other expectations or deadlines when it comes to release timelines?
Sure. Again, we rely on the peer jury for that. So depending on the scope of your project and what you're working on, it's the deadlines and expectations is you set those as your company, as a gaming developer, and then you present them to the jury. So as long as it makes sense, and I'm going to put it out there, but Darcy, you correct me, that a lot of people did start in this industry as working on their games. They have the full-time job and they're working on their passion, and they build their business and they build their games. So I think there is a lot of that within the community, and I know that a lot of the peer jurors have had that journey. So that might, get them excited that you're at that stage of your journey on your professional career and gaming development. So I would say, as long as it makes sense, the next logical step for you in your career, that it's manageable and it makes sense. And I think you have a great friend here with Sask Interactive to be able to kind of say, okay, this is where I'm at. This is what I want to do. This is where I want to progress. Is this feasible request to an agency such as Creative Saskatchewan? So I'll just use a quick example. The grant is up to $100,000 or 50% of the budget. So if this is your first game and it's very indie, maybe 100,000 might be like, okay, I'm going to build to that, but maybe it's a smaller ask. Maybe there's less risk to you as an individual or your newer company. So you start with that smaller ask, and then it's more realistic to the jury as well. And then we get to grow together as an agency and with your own gaming as well. So it really is up to you. You just want to make it make sense. Reach out to Sask Interactive in part of that journey.
Yeah, well said, Toby. Thank you very much. And I think the acknowledgement here also is around any programs or any development that someone has, it has to be the passion and the excitement of that. And of course, Sask Interactive, me and my team are here for that as well. Got another one from an anonymous attendee, so I'm not sure who that is. Does the project require an educational component?
No, we have two. So you have the gaming, digital gaming. It's still interactive, meaningly participatory, the educational, and sometimes there's a little bit of gray, like sometimes there's overlapping, but it can be straight entertainment, commercial game, straight e-learning property, which are often games. So there can be that crossover, but it can have an educational component, very, very strong educational component, where it can be a little gray, where it's educational, but also a game.
Right. Andre Faragazi has, I'm not too sure about this, does an ad supported qualify as for sale? And then,
yeah, that's not really in my wheelhouse. I would have to I'd probably take that question over to Darcy, or how that business model works with the gaming. So I'm not, that's not my expertise in that business model. So I would encourage reaching out to Sask Interactive, and as Darcy knows, we consult a lot with Sask Interactive, so they will consult back to us. We work very much as a team. So if there are questions such as this in the business model that okay, we don't see that often, but that let's talk about it, and let's figure out if
sure,
what that means to the program.
And Andre, and Andre and I have worked together before. If you want to clarify that on a sidebar with me, Andre, pop me a quick text or send me an email, and I'll answer it from my perspective. Another one here from Nicola, reading through the rubric earlier. I love that one. It felt like the design tech elements largely was about concept art. If the project is in a state where we're starting to have playable demo and a vertical slice with finalized art, is it worth submitting an addition to concept of that art?
Interesting. I would go back. Yeah, interesting. So again, that comes back to our jury. And I kind of think if it gets you excited, I would include it. If it makes sense for what you're presenting to the jury. It is interesting. This is the first year that we're rolling out this program, as a grant, and it's been really updated quite a bit. So we're going to learn as well. So you'll see that next year, a lot of these questions might be a bit more refined because we'll have gone through the process a bit more. So we'll be like, you know what, we could clarify that a bit more. We could move that around a bit more. So as it's the initial year, that kind of stuff will be finessed as the program is finessed. But I truly say this to a lot of our industries and grants. If it gets you excited and it gets the clarity of what you're asking to do, then include it, because it kind of, the jurors are so passionate about the industry. If you give them a little grain of excitement, they're gonna they just have to make sure they understand what you're asking for, understand that the budget aligns with what you're saying in your words, because your budget is the numbers story, and you want that to align with what you've said in your application as well, which is why I'll pitch one more time. It's always great to have a fresh set of eyes to read your application before you submit it. And that means you got to kind of plan backwards from that deadline. Give yourself the time to write it. Give yourself the time, then someone to read it and really listen to those questions. Like, I didn't quite understand why you had that upload. I didn't quite understand what this art was. Like, it could be as much as just putting a label on it. Like, this is what it is. And it's like, oh, okay, well, now it makes perfect sense. And that saves so much, because ideally you don't want jurors to be going, I don't quite understand why they attach that. Why is that there? And really, as Darcy kind of laughed there, it can be as easy as just like labeling the file or putting a little label on the stuff. It's the simplest stuff can just make people go, oh, I totally get it. But you're so close when you're so close to your project and you're writing those grants, you kind of get you're so focused. Sometimes it's hard to see those things, and that's why getting a second set of eyes is amazing.
Yeah, I'll just add a little piece to that. Having another review, or even if you have questions, Megan has posted my email in there. Please reach out to me if there's anything that I can help from my perspective in the industry and from Sask Interactive's perspective. We're here to support and help you through the process. So we're always looking forward to that. Colin Widow, he's also got a quick question here. If my game is close to being done and my monetary needs is probably more than 10% of marketing, does that disqualify?
I love this question. So what's new is you can apply at any time of your project development. So if you're towards the beginning, if you're towards the end, the thing is you can only go 6 months previously before your application date. So like, just remember that 6 month cutoff, and you will have to show expenses for those 6 months. So that's important to know. And so you can capture a lot more phases of development, which is really exciting for us. Now we do have other marketing grants, which is fantastic. So we've got a market and export development micro grant, which is up to $5,000 or 50% of the cash budget. We also have a major one, which is up to $25,000 or 50% of your budget. If you've got a super big marketing plan, you can ask for a 2-year marketing grant up to $50,000 or 50% of the budget. I always say over 50% of the budget. That's for really big launches. So we've got smaller or a component of a launch in the micro. You have a larger for the major, and then you also have support. I will note, sometimes people make this assumption. I don't know why people like to think you do not have to get a production grant to ask for marketing money from Creative Saskatchewan. It's not one contingent or the other. With the 10% of the digital gaming grant, that 10% marketing allowance, that is attached to that production grant, and you have to be approved for that. But for the market and export grants, that's a separate program. It does not, you do not have to receive production funds to access those programs. The only contingent is it has to be an eligible production. So it has to be a game or an e-learning property for our marketing grants. So thank you so much for that question, Colin. I was excited to talk more about our marketing
yeah, that's
support.
A good one. Yeah, it is. These questions are very valid and very good questions. And again, Megan has popped another link in there to the Creative Sask Market and Export Development Fund. Toby, there is no more questions in here. We did book this off for an hour. If there's anything further that anyone has as a question or inquiry or further clarification, again, my email is there, and also Toby is a program manager at Creative Sask. So if there's anything, and she manages the Sask Interactive and or the game development grant fund. So if there's any question, you can also pop a quick note to Toby as well.
And I'm sure, like, before the deadline, so the grant opens later in June and the deadline is later in October. I'm sure you'll hear more from Sask Interactive and Creative Saskatchewan around September, late August. We'll probably try to do another venture like this, have some more, have another event of some sort to answer questions closer to the deadline. I know people love spending months in advance making their grant applications, but sometimes it's a bit more timely, like the month before. So we'll touch base hopefully with everybody in September, see how it's going. And we're just thrilled with this new program, and we hope that it'll speak to the sector's needs and will have a lot of impact.
Yeah, well said, Toby. And again, there is nothing further there. So do you want to say any final words, Toby?
No, just we're really excited to, like, I think I already said it. We're just so excited about this program. And with every new program, you might stump the program team. We might be like, ooh, that's a really good question. We'll get back to you. And it might take us a few days, but we will get back to you. So just a note, you know, feel free anytime to contact us during business hours. I suppose I should say that. But we'll get back to you quicker in business hours. But, you know, if there's something we don't know that we haven't really thought of, we'll get back to you and figure it out, because that does happen every so often. Like, oh, that's a good question. Make us think. Love it.
Yeah, and this recording of this webinar will be available later on in the week. And so watch Creative Sask's website for that, and also Sask Interactive, our website. We link to that webinar to get at a later date. Nothing else there, Toby. So thanks very much for co-hosting with me. Appreciate it as usual, and always nice working with you again. Megan, thank you very much for keeping us on track, and everyone have a really nice afternoon. Look forward to the launch of the new grant, and again, anything that anyone needs, there's always Toby and myself to reach out to. So thanks again, Toby and Creative Sask, and everyone have a nice afternoon.
Thank you, Darcy. Thanks, Sask Interactive.
Bye.